Well, let's have a closer look now at the latest WikiLeaks revelations and reports that Afghanistan scared the hell out of Kevin Rudd. Is this a revelation about the truth of Australia's mission in the Middle East or just diplomatic chatter? I'm joined in the studio by Labor's Stephen Jones and in Melbourne Liberal MP Josh Frydenberg for our last regular Polly's panel of a Friday for this year. Welcome to both of you.
Good afternoon, Ali. G'day, Josh.
Hi, Stephen. Hi, Ali.
Well, we can't go past that WikiLeaks, I think, as a story, if not of the week, may I suggest perhaps a story of the season. Stephen Jones, how damaging is it to have your foreign minister, who was your prime minister, described as a control freak, and for the very deep pessimism about the outlook in Afghanistan to be made public when the very public protestations are that progress has been made?
Look, a few general observations and then to the points you make. Firstly, a lot of the stuff that's been reported to be included in the WikiLeaks to date is nothing more than diplomatic chatter and gossip. And some of it...
In fact, does it tell us anything about Kevin Rudd that we didn't already know?
Well, a number of books have been published on much of this stuff, so I don't think it really takes public knowledge of the insides of government operation very, very far at all. A couple of things that have come up in the light of this debate that I'd like to comment on. The first is that this government, the Gillard government and the Rudd government, have shown a greater commitment to open and transparent government than any since Federation. We've radically overhauled the freedom of information laws. We've put a lot of effort into particular disclosure of government information around education and health and a number of other areas as well. So any criticism that the Gillard government is not committed to open and transparent government doesn't stack up. Secondly, the criticisms about the rights of Mr Assange. He will be afforded the full rights that any other Australian citizen is afforded to when they get into trouble.
But my question is more, and I take your point about a lot of it, I mean, well, much of it being, I guess, just the inner workings of diplomacy and in that way being a wonderful diplomatic soap opera, if you like, but really some very significant observations, particularly what came out regarding Afghanistan this morning. I mean, we have a public commitment that progress is being made, and this is at the time that these statements were being made behind closed doors, that really there was enormous pessimism about the outlook for Afghanistan. That doesn't really instill faith in the system.
It is the position of this government and just about every other government around the world that we aren't going to be commenting on the content or alleged content of the cables. What I can say is this, however, Ali, is that it is possible for us to be 100% committed to a cause, and that is restoring stability and democracy in Afghanistan, and have some misgivings about some of the strategies that are being deployed by some of our allies.
Josh Frydenberg?
Well, it's no surprise, Ali, that Stephen's on the defensive about the WikiLeaks. There's two major revelations. The first is that Mark Habib and the other faceless men in the Labor Party have for months been plotting the downfall of Kevin Rudd, despite their protestations that this was a last-minute hatchet job. And secondly, it's the stinging rebuke for Kevin Rudd's foreign policy record by the Americans themselves. And let's not forget, Kevin Rudd, no longer the Prime Minister, is the Foreign Minister. And there is a lack of confidence on behalf of the Americans on his ability to do what's in Australia and in the world's best interest when it comes to foreign policy.
Can you read that all into one or two cables?
Yes, I mean, I think we can, and I think they are very damning rebukes. I mean, it's there in black and white what they said about Kevin Rudd's foreign policy record and the fact his office's inability to sort of carry it out, and this is a real problem for Julia Gillard going into next year. On Afghanistan, we, on our side of politics, do support the Australian commitment to Afghanistan. It's important that that is a bipartisan commitment, and there are good reasons for Australia to be there, not least to stop the international terrorism threat.
Do you want to respond
and so I think that's important.
The damage allegations then?
What really matters when we're talking about our capacity to engage in diplomacy with our allies and others is how strong are the relationships. And I'd listen to the words that were coming out of the leader, the US President Barack Obama, the Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, and those closest to them, who say excellent relationship, probably the best in the Western world, with our Foreign Minister Kevin Rudd and Julia Gillard, and in fact have been very influential behind the scenes, particularly in our region.
Is that not a fair point? I mean, Hillary Clinton was positively effusive, was she not, about Kevin Rudd when she was here?
Look, I think the Americans are really taken aback the fact that these have become public, but these were the frank assessments, not expected to become public, of American diplomats in Canberra. And Mark Arbib, talking up the ACTU's influence on the Labor Party is also another reminder of who's really wagging the tail in the Labor Party at the moment.
Josh, are you seriously suggesting that the US Secretary of State didn't mean what she said when she said that Kevin Rudd was not only a close ally but very influential in the formation of the US thinking in the Asia-Pacific region? Are you seriously suggesting that she didn't mean it when she said that?
Are we seriously not suggesting that the American diplomats based in Australia think that Kevin Rudd's a control freak and has not been carrying out Australian foreign policy effectively? I mean, that's what they said, Steve, and they also talked about the control of the unions, and Mark Arbib has talked about wanting to knife Kevin Rudd well before it happened. I mean, these are pretty damning allegations and illustrations of what's been going on behind the Labor Party.
Josh Frydenberg, we have to say, of course, it's only a couple, and The Age has got many. We spoke to The Age's editor yesterday. There are many more to come. Is your side of politics sitting there and waiting with bated breath for revelations about John Howard or Alexander Downer?
Well, let's see what happens. I mean, this is unprecedented what is happening. 250,000 private confidential cables making their way into the public sphere. I mean, this is, obviously causing great embarrassment around the world.
A simple question, Josh. Do you think it's a good thing or not that these cables have been released?
This actually was my next question. Blunt question. Publish or not publish?
Well, I think you've got to look on a case-by-case basis, because where cables that do damage the national security interests of Australia or its allies or put people's lives in risk, they should not be published.
Have you seen anything like that yet, though, regarding Australia?
Well, there's been some talk. Well, regarding Australia, what we've mainly seen is embarrassment for the Labor Party so far. So let's see what else comes out. But if there were cables that would put people's lives in risk, they certainly should remain confidential.
Publish or not publish, Stephen Jones?
My concern is not so much with the journalists and others who publish, although there may be offences that have occurred. We don't know yet.
But what would they possibly be?
If the same disclosure had occurred in Australia, there absolutely would have been, and if that had been Australian information that had been disclosed and published, there absolutely would have been an offence here. We don't know whether that's occurred or not, which is why it would be premature for us to make any comment in that respect. But
Julia Gillard has made very strong comments.
There's a very important issue at the centre of this, and that is that the normal operations of diplomacy cannot occur. Government-to-government relationships and discussions cannot occur if either side thinks that everything they say is going to be put down in writing, reliably, accurately or not, and then sometime in the near future appear its way on the front pages of every newspaper in the country.
But doesn't the problem then become really not one to do with the media, but more the one to do with America's security operations and how they protect their own information?
No, that is absolutely a concern, absolutely a concern. If the same thing had occurred here, you'd expect there to be deep concern about the reliability of our public service organisations.
Why has the Australian government, and in particular, of course, with the comments by the Prime Minister, which Josh Frydenberg was referring to, why target just WikiLeaks? Why is WikiLeaks any different to The Age, the Sydney Morning Herald, The Guardian, the Asian Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, any of those that have chosen to publish this information?
Look, I think there is a point to be made, and I think I heard Josh agreeing with me on this, that there is a point to which publication is reckless. My concern, however, is with the disclosure in the first place, the leaking of the information in the first place. I mean, you can't blame a journalist 9 days out of 10 for wanting to get a good yarn up. That's your job. That's what you do. So my objection, my concern, my criticism is focused on the fact that people have leaked that information inappropriately in the first place.
Well, what about the fact that 2 million people had access to that information in the first place?
Again, my concern is with the overall apparatus that enabled that to occur.
Josh Frydenberg?
Yeah, I mean, there are some real hard questions the Americans need to answer as to how this actually occurred. and the flagrant disregard for their security systems. And I think that is of concern, and I think it will actually affect the way diplomats do talk, frankly, between each other for a piece of time. I mean, who knows how long, but certainly this is going to make everyone much more wary what they say in confidential discussions with their diplomats.
Let's move on. I mean, there are a lot of issues that we could talk about in our last reflection of the year, but I do want to ask you both, because of course you started being panellists with us on a Friday before you were even elected, and now you're elected and you've continued to be. So if we can just have a look back over 2010 and perhaps the most memorable moment. Josh Frydenberg, do you have one?
Look, I think the election campaign, celebrating that night with my fellow workers and volunteers in the electorate of Kooyong was terrific, because so many people put in so much amount of time. I think Tony Abbott brought us back from the brink. I mean, he only won the leadership ballot by one vote in December of last year, and what he managed to do is turn the ship around, and we have now done what was thought impossible, and has brought a first-term Labor government into becoming a minority government, and that's a very significant achievement. And Julia Gillard, her government looks very fragile. It's an underperforming government, and I think the Victorian election result just a few weeks ago has been very significant and will have knock-on ramifications for Julia Gillard.
You've made hay with your memorable moment. Your memorable moment, Stephen Jones?
Three of them, Ali, winning the election. Forming government.
Did you win it?
Forming government.
Or winning the negotiation, is that
That's right.
Winning my election in my seat of Throsby, a great honour. Forming government, and then I think the other significant moment was seeing the Leader of the House and the Minister for Infrastructure and other things, Anthony Albanese, on the last day of Parliament, reading through the list of 54 pieces of legislation, including significant reforms to our telecommunications industry that has been achieved by the Gillard Labor government in 8 weeks. These are reforms that that your side, Josh, struggled with, that could not pull through in over 12 years.
You've both become political masters incredibly quickly at turning things around to make your point. A hat goes off to you. Let me ask you both to make a prediction for 2011, just one.
Okay, we currently have close to 50 local government areas that have been declared disaster zones due to the floods. A lot of these are critical agricultural areas as well.
This is your domain too, isn't it?
Absolutely, and I think that is going to have an impact on the price of some of our food, particularly fruit, over the next 3 to 4 months. The people who are affected are those people, the families and the businesses in those flood-affected areas at the moment, and our hearts go out for them over Christmas, but is going to have a knock-on effect to everyone over the coming months.
Yeah. Josh Frydenberg?
Look, I think in New South Wales, Labor Party is heading for a deserved defeat, and I think, again, this is going to put much more pressure on Julia Gillard after the Victorian defeat, and with the Bligh government in Queensland under great pressure, and her non-performing government at a federal level, there's going to be great pressure on the Labor brand, and it will start to crumble.
Well, both of you, thank you so much for joining us. Of course, Josh Frydenberg, we wish you all the best with your nuptials next week. I thought perhaps that you would name your memorable moment for next year, or your prediction, a safe year of first marriage. But best wishes for that. And Merry Christmas to both of you, and many thanks for joining us every Friday.
Thank you, and all the best for your wedding next week, Josh.
Thanks, and Merry Christmas, Stephen, and Merry Christmas, Ali. Thank you very much.
Thank you both. Josh Frydenberg there in Melbourne and Stephen Jones in Sydney.